In section 4b, we begin discussing the power of compound interest. This is a very important section. So in section 4b, you may see some problems which are just reviewing some helpful algebraic concepts you might encounter when using formulas in chapter 4. In section 4b particularly, we will look at three main formulas for interest. So the first will be simple interest. Be sure to only use this formula when you see the word simple in word problems. We will then talk about compound interest. This is a very important formula, probably something you might have seen in a previous algebra class. And though the variables in our book might look slightly different, it's most likely the same formula you have used before. And then thirdly, we will discuss continuous compound interest. In this formula, you will use a letter E. E is an irrational number similar to pi. I want you to find this on your calculator, locate this so that you understand how to use that properly in the formula. You will also discuss annual percentage yield in this section. Throughout the homework, you will work problems which are very similar to real-world concepts that you could encounter as an adult. The formula for simple interest is simply the product of the initial investment, which we often call the principal, times the interest rate, which is often given as a percentage. We typically rewrite as a number between 0 and 1. And lastly, the length of time. So we take the product of these three values. This gives us the interest paid only on an original investment and not any interest added at later dates. Remember that in problems, if you were asked to find the total amount, including your initial deposit, you may need to add that initial investment to this product because this is only giving you the simple interest. Compound interest is the product of your initial principal times, we have in parentheses, so these parentheses are very important. This 1 represents 100%. And what we're doing is we're multiplying our principal by something greater than 100% so that that's growing. So we add the 100% or 1 to our APR, that's annual percentage yield. Since that's an annual rate, we want to divide that by the frequency of compounding periods per year. So N is often months. Perhaps we would take the APR and divide by 12 if it were monthly compounding. This gives us a percentage inside the parentheses that's a bit bigger than 100%. We then take that to an exponent, and you'll notice there are parentheses around this exponent. Those are really important. Really, all this exponent is doing is multiplying that percentage times itself in times y times. So if you think about in periods per year and y is the number of years, this exponent simply represents the number of times that interest is compounded overall. This is an exponential expression, so we have p times this percentage raised to an exponent. I encourage you to use these parentheses appropriately in your calculators. If you do encounter some issues, make sure that you're entering parentheses appropriately. And lastly, we talk about continuous compound interest. In this formula, you might have encountered this in an algebra class before. I find students typically have this memorized because it makes kind of a nice word. It looks like the word PERT here. This is a formula to help us represent the maximal amount of interest which could be made from an initial principal. It's not a realistic value here, a realistic model, because we can't walk into a bank and ask for continuous compound interest. However, this does allow us to find maximal amounts. What we have here is the product of the principal times e to the rate, still the APR here, times time. This number e is not a variable. This is a number on your calculator, and it's approximately 2.72. You'll want to identify this on your calculator and make sure that you're using that in this formula. When you study the annual percentage yield, you will take simply the amount of interest you made from 1 year, and you will divide that by your initial deposit. Often the annual percentage yield, or APY, is sometimes called the effective yield. This is simply the percentage by which a balance increases in 1 year.